From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network. And now, here is Jim and Rich.
Off and running again on the often delayed next edition of the Armchair Experts. Jim Leon, Rich Massaro, like it or not, another hour of contemplations, ruminations, insinuations, intimations, contemplations. I don't know what else we're there. John DeVita in there spinning the dials, trying to make us sound like we actually know what we're doing.
Yeah, and we're ready for another hour of... Well, no, I was going to say, if you're looking for an hour of broadcast excellence, don't look over here. Go one dial to your right, you'll get WMBI 90.1 broadcast excellence.
I don't know where to begin. There is so much we can deal with. We can start with the disaster that was the Bears this weekend. I guess I picked a good weekend not to be by a TV, and I was driving back from Michigan, and while I was up there, what do you get to see? You get to see the Lions up there.
I guess we picked the wrong week to get off of amphetamines, Jim.
No. What's your thought here? Now, Cutler's out for minimum of 4 weeks. And I think the one thing, just looking at the stats and reading the newspaper, when Mark Trestman came in, he talked about football, having a system of football. Mm-hmm. And I guess when we looked at Josh McCown coming in there, hello?
Yes, I'm turning my phone on.
Hello?
Okay.
When we looked at Josh McCown coming in there, I guess he handled the ball quite well.
Well, I
didn't
see the game,
okay.
But what I liked in the aftermath of the game, what I read, and I think what you're referring to is Trestman really it's next man up as far as the quarterback goes. You know what? We're not going to change what we do just because it's McCown and not Cutler, and I think that's the right way to go. I hate when I hear a coach intimate that we're going to have to maybe reduce the game plan, change the game plan because now quarterback B is in instead of quarterback A. I think that's the wrong way to go in most cases. I'm not going to say every case. But, I think – and McCown showed that the offense ran smoothly. He was in there for the majority of the game, I think, and he had a really good game.
Yeah, he really did. I mean, the question now is what are they going to do with that defense because it's got awful.
Yeah, you know what I'm thinking, Jim? I don't know if we talked about this on the air or if we just talked about this in conversation between ourselves.
I think we need to carry a tape recorder all the time.
I'm thinking to myself that I know it looks bad with the defense, but I also don't think that it's beyond repair, and I'm hoping that Mel Tucker and the rest of the staff get their heads together and maybe if they come up with something a little bit different, and I'm not a guru on any of this stuff, so I couldn't suggest what it is. One of the things I think you and I had talked about when we started to have some problems with D linemen going down was maybe going to the 3-4. But now I think we have the problem with Briggs. Is Briggs also going to be out for a month?
Briggs is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I was using that 3-4 idea with the thought in mind that with the starting 3 linebackers, plus you had Bostic, which would be a good opportunity for him to get some playing time. But now the linebacker depth is thinned out a little bit with Briggs being gone. And I don't know if that 3-4 is the idea anymore. But what I'm saying is this is the opportunity. And I'm going to go back to what you said, Jim, early on before the Bears even started this season. And I know the Bears probably don't think this way, but I'm going to use your thinking. You said, you know what? I'm just going to take a wait-and-see attitude on this season. Whatever develops, and, I'm just going to kick back and watch it happen. I'm thinking maybe the Bears, and I know it's hard for them because they're caught up in the thing. And when I say they, I'm talking about the coaching staff.
Sure,
Because, of
sure.
course, you want to be successful. But I'm thinking maybe this is the time on defense to wing it with something different. Who knows? Take something out of your trick bag there.
Well, if it sounds trite by saying this, but maybe this is a good week that the bye happened to come along, where it gives them an opportunity to reevaluate everything during this period. Unfortunately, what's out there to bring people in ain't much. I mean, when you start to hear the name Tom Zibikowski bandied about to be brought in as a safety, what does that tell you?
Well, there's another thing, though, Jim. I have to say two things there. I hear, again, I didn't see the game, but I hear Chris Conti's name coming up negatively.
Apparently, he was awful.
But here's what I was going to... Did you ever read the book Paper Lion?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you remember the story that Plimpton tells, but he says Dick LeBeau, who's obviously a great defensive coordinator with the Steelers now and has a really long history in the NFL...
Dick LeBeau's 167 years old.
I think Dick LeBeau was a cornerback or a safety on the Lions, and the all-time great Night Train Lane was one of his defensive backfield mates. And Plimpton tells the story about a situation where Lane actually was beaten on the play, but the way it looked was that LeBeau was the guy who looked like he was beaten, and he chased the receiver all the way into the end zone. The other team scored, and as they're going into the end zone, Night Train is pointing his finger at Dickie, and he's going, Dick. He goes, Dickie, that's my fault, Dickie. But he's, Plimpton's saying 60,000 people are looking at Lane pointing the finger at LeBeau like, you screwed up, and they're, irate at LeBeau. So my point would be, unless you really know what the coverages are, and I didn't see the game, so I don't know what everybody's talking about with Conti, but unless you really know what everybody's responsibility is on each play, I don't know that I'm ready to rip Conti or anybody else because I don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
He seems to be the poster boy now for we need to do something with the defense. Him and Major Wright, apparently. And again, I'm at a disadvantage here. Not seeing it. Just right now knowing that the Bears now are 25th in total defense, which is unheard of with this ball club. And I think it's a case, I think it's a case of trying to go one more year, thinking they could get one more year out of that defense.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think, though, Jim, here's what I look at the big picture. I'd say going into this, what is this the second season that Emery's been the GM or whatever his title actually is? He's GM, right?
He had, yes, he's the general manager. He had, when they hired him, he had Lovey for 1 year, and so this is into his second season.
Okay.
I think the first draft was terrible.
Okay, but let's look at it this way. This offseason, he had to address two major concerns. One was the offensive line, which I think they did an excellent job on.
Right.
The other was the linebacking core, which I think they did a very good job on. And now, obviously, with the amount of draft picks you have and the amount of resources you have, two other critical areas, one that I didn't really see coming, but obviously is, I think, the main weakness in the defense is the defensive line.
Yeah.
And, I don't, even during the Lovie Smith era, I couldn't tell you how many guys started at safety, but safety apparently seems to be a concern again, although when they were winning out of the gate, you didn't hear much about the safeties playing well or poorly either way. But I think you're really onto something. I think they did, and I think it was the right move, to be honest with you, or the only move that they had available. They tried to get one more year with, say, Peppers, Tillman, Briggs. Peppers, I think, has some injuries. He's slowing down. He's 34 years old. Tillman, age is catching up. He's had more injuries this year than he's ever had.
Knee problem.
And now Briggs is out.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think realistically they could have addressed every problem area that they had. I think that it was a reasonable thing to try to go with those guys again. But the other thing I would say is this. the papers make a big deal out of the turnovers caused by the Bear defense, and that is a great thing. They create a lot of turnovers, but if they didn't have those guys who created those turnovers, they would be at the bottom of the league defensively because their defense is not overall good. If they didn't have guys, say, like Tillman, Jennings, whoever else are the big guys
Right.
on turnovers, last year, I don't think their defense was that good. Again, the turnovers helped them, and what's playing out again this year is against teams that are a little weaker. They have success against teams that are a little bit better. Not as much success, and in fact, they're some teams that have been weak offensively going into the week that they played the Bears have come out with a better offensive performance against the Bears than they had up to that point. So, but I think this is the way it is, and I think that Emory will address those areas of needs in the offseason, and I think you'll see an upgrade next year.
And I think the issue too is you're going to have some. You might have some cap space to play with, because now you have to ask the question: you're going to give Jay Cutler new paper?
That's a good question. I don't know what to say. I was thinking this morning before the broadcast. I would. How many teams are in the NFL? 30-some teams, right?
32.
This is really when you talk about Jay Cutler, and I'm going to a little bit different subject here. Do you realize how many? Now you probably have 4 superstar quarterbacks. You have Manning, Brady, Breeze, and Rodgers, who are considered superstar quarterbacks.
And Andrew Luck is right on the cusp.
Well, but I'm saying, you know what? When you get to the next level, you have probably a dozen guys who I would say are good NFL quarterbacks, good or better than good. I'd throw Cutler into that group.
Sure.
And so I guess the question would be, unless you could really get somebody who's better, why would you not keep Cutler?
True.
And I don't know that
True.
you're going to be able to upgrade the position unless
True.
there's somebody that I really don't see. Well, put it this way. If you think your team can possibly be on the verge of going to the Super Bowl, then, a rookie is out of the question unless you happen to get a Luck or a Griffin or somebody, or Wilson, somebody like that.
You do that, and the issue, and you almost become a victim of your own almost success or above mediocrity by drafting in the middle of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get a chance at that superstar, that franchise difference maker.
Mm-hmm.
You get a good player, a reasonable player. You get well, all right. Kyle Long was a surprise.
Yeah,
And I think he's played well. Shea McClellan, I think, and it would not totally surprise me, they don't have the talent. At least all the experts keep saying they can't go to the talent right now and put in a 3-4, and certainly in the middle of the year. But it would not surprise me if you see a 3-4 next year. And I think you're going to see some of these hybrid 3-4s, 4-3s, where they're jumping in and out. And I think, the problem is I don't think McClellan is the size for a defensive end. He's going to be an outside linebacker.
I'll tell you what, I don't know that size necessarily is that important. When you look at a guy, who's the guy that played for the Colts for so many years, that was the Freeney.
Yeah.
When you see guys like Freeney and Mathis have success, and they're not big guys. But I think you're right. I think Shea McClellan will be an effective football player for the Bears, but I'd like to see them use him in the, as you say, like as a hybrid, where he moves around a little bit. He stands up sometimes. He's in a 3-point sometimes. I think that's an effective a way to use a player of his abilities.
Yeah.
So, I was going to say, Jim, you mentioned drafting in the middle of the pack, and when I texted you this morning about having a really great broadcast, and you said we should have 4 hours worth of material. I started to think about some things, and talking about talent, and again, I'm switching the subject. I don't think drafting in the middle of the pack, at the top, at the bottom, is as important as grabbing guys who can play. You know what? Watching the St. Louis Cardinals go to the World Series again, and what is this, the third time in 5 years or something?
Something like that.
You know, and you look and you say to yourself, I'm thinking, now, I don't follow this stuff that closely, but you'll see different things like Baseball America and other publications where they'll say the hottest prospects. You know what? I don't know that I'm right on this, but I'll bet you Pete Kozma and Matt Carpenter and Adams, all guys who, Michael Wacha, Joe Kelly, all guys who came up through the Cardinals system. My bet is that none of those guys were featured as your top superstar prospects, but guess what? They're really excellent players. They're playing very solid baseball, and young guys propelling the Cardinals into the World Series in critical positions, pitching, shortstop, second base. And to me, I go back to a guy like Mike Ditka, who I don't know if Mike Ditka was the greatest coach. I think he came along, and this is a whole different conversation. He was the right guy at the right time for the Bears.
Right.
But I think he knows football players. And I remember he told a story one time about a guy named Chris Nioli that the Saints drafted number 1 when he was with the Saints. And he told a story about Nioli, who was an offensive lineman at Colorado, and his coach was former quarterback at UCLA, Rick Neuheisel. And at halftime of a game, Neuheisel was all over the team, and Nioli sort of took it personally. He thought Neuheisel was talking to him, and, you know, Neuheisel got the guys fired up, and at the end of his talk, Nioli got up, he grabbed Neuheisel, and he threw him through the blackboard. And Neuheisel got up like, I wasn't talking to you, Chris, but I like that attitude. And, Ditka's thing was, this was a football player, and he drafted him number 1. And what I'm saying is this. There's a lot of guys with talent. It doesn't make them a football or baseball player, what have you. You know what? A player is a player. A guy who knows how to play is a guy who knows how to play. And
I guess I'm saying what I'm saying is you're looking for someone who can come in and make that instant impact.
But you have to know what you're looking at.
You have to know what you're looking at. You have to know what you need, too.
The papers were touting a guy who I think, if he hadn't gotten hurt, would be having an excellent rookie year in E.J. Manuel. But not too many people were saying that he was even the number 1 quarterback prospect. But
True.
I think Doug Marrone in Buffalo had him starting. I guess he's injured now, and they've gone to the backup. But you know what? There was a guy who, from what little bit I read, I never saw him play, but I had the feeling that this was a guy who was going to be able to maybe step in and do the job as a quarterback. And I think when he's healthy, he will be. But that's Buffalo news, not Chicago news.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, let the armchair experts in
Buffalo take care of that.
Talk care of that. We're not on the air in Buffalo.
Well, we're on the air sometimes in Schiller Park, though.
And on a clear day.
Sometimes.
And on a clear day, you can hear us on River Road.
That's it.
That's right.
Yeah, but you're on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network.
Well, that's true. We are on the Windy City Hometown Network 24 hours a day. Worldwide. That's right. I hope our Chinese listeners, I hope our folks in China that were listening to us during basketball season will find out about us again.
You know, Jim, let's we were fired up a couple weeks ago about the Cubs axing of Dale Swain. Now normally at the end of baseball season, I was getting a little tired of our conversations about baseball, but I'm a little charged up about baseball now.
Well, I'll give you a couple of things here. First of all, just think of all the discussions that we can have, and we're going to start onto when we start on the Cubs. I was looking through something online, and I happened to get a link. I think it was a link to an old Reds-Cubs game, and it was through ESPN Radio in Cincinnati. And they had their question of the day up there. It said, who's your favorite for the new Reds manager?
Okay.
The pitching coach, Brad Wright, I can't even remember his name, or Jim Riggleman?
Oh my God, Jim Mergelman must have a good PR guy or something. How does he get in these conversations?
I don't know, but the pitching coach got the job this morning.
Okay.
And it was another thing, too, just speaking of managerial changes, and I could understand it watching the game Saturday night. Jim Leyland quit as the Tiger manager, and I was beginning to wonder, watching him Saturday night, if he had lost interest.
I got to tell you, Jim Matthews asked me this question over coffee the other day. He says, "Oh, Jim Leland quit," and I said, "So what? I could care less." I mean, did you see Jim Leland's his career managing record with the Tigers is somewhat over 500. His overall career record is somewhat over 500.
Barely over 500. He was 700 and 597 with the Tigers.
Okay, so he's 100 some games over.
Yeah, and 1769 and 1728 overall.
So he's 40 some games over 500.
He's basically a five. And I mean, the biggest issue with him was one year he wins the World Championship, and then the next year they lose 107 with the Marlins.
He's Gene Walk light as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I'm not, and you know what? God bless him. He had a long career. He was never a major league player. He had a long career as a manager. But I never was all that impressed with Jim Leland, and I'm sure the Tigers will find somebody to fill that spot.
Before we get into a discussion of our local heroes, or whatever we want to call them, baseball-wise here, I want to give you something to see if you can keep this past season of disaster that we watched into some perspective. Just think if you would have been a fan, if we would be in Houston right now and talking baseball.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And this was an article that I pulled off of ESPN.com back in the end of September, talking about the Astros. At 51, at that point in time, at 51 and 105, they've already become the fifth team in the past half century and the 11th team since 1900 to lose at least 100 games 3 seasons in a row. But next up is a milestone only Casey Stengel and Choo-Choo Coleman can appreciate. If the Astros lose just one more time this season, they'd become only the second team ever and the first non-expansion team. Well, they were back 50 years ago, to lose at least 106 games 3 years in a row. The other was Casey and Choo-Choo's legendary 62-65 Mets, who did that in the first 4 years of their existence. The magic number to avoid hanging out with that crew is 6, because they need to go 6-0 to finish with only 105 losses. The good news is they did win 6 in a row once this year. The bad news is that's their only 6-game winning streak in the past 500 years. Here's an even bigger number to watch.
Past 500 years?
500 games, rather.
Oh,
Did I say 500 years? Oh,
yeah.
Well, it's been a long baseball season.
Yeah,
Here's an even bigger
sure.
number to watch. If the Astros don't go 4-2, they'll carve out a niche in their history book all their own. Not by just losing 106 games 3 years in a row, but losing 106 games in the first year, and then losing more games than that in each of the next 2 years. They went 56 and 106 2 years ago. They were 55 and 107 last year. They wound up losing 111 this year.
Well, the big problem with that is, I mean, obviously, you're a professional team. You don't want to lose like that. But the big problem is when the Mets lost like that, you had some interesting characters. You had Casey Stengel, like you say, Choo-Choo Coleman. You had marvelous Marv Throneberry, and a cast of
Jimmy Pearsall, too.
and a cast of hundreds or thousands, whatever. But at least they were interesting and fun and funny. This is, when you talk about a team like the Astros, it's sort of a depressing type of losing where there is, they're actually trying to be good and they stink. So, but you know what? You talk about the Astros. I guess you're trying to say it could be worse than, because the Cubs have just gone through the 3 worst years in their history, losing-wise. And I don't see it getting better anytime soon. And the one thing, I'm going to say this. There's some good things that I've seen in terms of talent brought in by Epstein and Hoyer. But overall, I think they're jerks. Because I'll tell you why. You put a guy in the managerial position that you put Swaim in. 88. Now think about this, Jim. 88 players in 2 seasons. That's 3.5 teams coming and going.
Isn't
Three
it
and a
more?
half
Isn't it
teams.
more than that?
No, 88 players is.
I thought it was
3.5
closer to
teams.
100. I thought it was over 100. I think there were 53 this year, weren't there?
I thought I had read it was 88 players. But if
Okay.
it's either
Might have
way,
been
put
88
it this way:
pitchers.
if it's 100 players, that's 4 teams coming and going in 2 years. The thing I would say is, I think you used the most accurate word that I could use for the Cubs. I think even with that happening, they were still a compelling team. Not to say they were a good team, but compelling, because you would see guys who, maybe they were going to be here for a week or maybe they were going to be here for the whole year, but they would come in, and the manager, I'm going to give the manager and his coaching staff credit for this. You saw them play hard regardless of their situation and still try to be competitive. And then the guys who created this situation, which is management, not the manager, but the management above him, then come around and axe this guy. To me, I would say this: you owe the man the 3rd year. And the other thing that really burns me is if they had actually, when they fired him, the one way I would have given them a pass is if they had somebody in place and a big name, and I'm not saying a big name would help the situation any more than that would do any better than Swaim, but if they would have had, say, Girardi, which is the guy I think they wanted in the wings, and they had talked to him on the QT and knew that he was going to come,
send it through back channels.
Then I would say, okay, at least that's a plan. But apparently there is no plan because Girardi re-signs with the Yankees. And I don't know that he ever really had any intention of the Cubs. They axed the manager in place, and now we're going to get the same type of a manager. We're going to get somebody who's I'm not going to say desperate for a job, but is looking for a major league job, any type of major league job, because that's what this is at this point in time. And it's no different than if you were going to manage the Houston Astros or the Florida Marlins. That's where the Cubs are at this point in time. And so who are we going to get? And the other thing is it's going to be somebody who's willing to, again, to be a placeholder, because the management has already showed their hand. Unless you're a big name, you're just here to take whatever crap we give you to deal with. And when the time comes that we think that the right people are in place to make a run at a pennant or a playoff spot, you're going to be gone anyway. So,
when you look at the, I'll give him credit for being very transparent with their intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at this now. We're going into the 3rd year of the plan.
The plan.
The plan.
The big plan.
And we're looking at this at a point again saying, well, we're not going to see any improvement this year. 14 is probably going to be another 90-loss season. 15 is going to be questionable. Maybe you'll start seeing some improvement in 15. And that's you're still trying to figure out if Starlin Castro is your solution.
Well,
I don't understand it. I really don't understand it. They keep saying Baez is the key. Baez is the key. Soler is going to be the key too, but he was injured. Albert Almora is supposed to be the keeper. He's really supposed to be the star. And I mean, scouts were talking about him having capabilities right now, playing when he was playing out in Kane County. The key is going to be, and it's interesting, and I read this, and I think you and I have talked about this before, is these guys come up to AA now.
Mm-hmm.
AA is where you separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, I think that's right.
This is where you're going to find, do you have a ball player or do you have nothing?
Mm-hmm.
The pitching staff, I guess, what I keep saying, was Swaim a bad hire? I don't know. Was he a bad fire? I don't know. all I can look at is in one thing and say is some of your key pieces. Rizzo regressed.
Mm-hmm.
Castro regressed. Barney defensively was good but lost in the field. Samardzija took a step backwards this year. So,
well, you know what though?
I
tell you what, they conveniently lay all of that at the manager's feet. But maybe the problem is, maybe those guys are not ready, or never will be. I'm not saying they're not going to be major league players or guys with major league careers, but maybe they're not guys who are going to be able to carry the water for a team. And I think, you know what, John is standing up. He's ready to give us we got to
take a break.
Okay.
You are listening to Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro from the John Navita Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network. And now, back to Jim and Rich.
We broke the station.
That was good. Well, that was fast.
We broke the station.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to put it back together.
You know, we've seen what is this Samardzija's
second full year as a starter,
and how many? What is he? 4 or 5 years in the majors?
Yeah.
Okay, I would say this. I always question.
He's not a number one. I mean,
I always question why they just didn't have him starting from the get-go. Because I think he's a starter as opposed to a reliever. Now, whether he doesn't appear that he's going to be a number one. Starlin Castro, I think even when he was hitting well, there were some questions, and hitting was his strong point. There were some questions in my mind about, I always said, and I don't know if I said it on the air, but I said, okay, if you really look at Starlin Castro, they would have him batting anywhere. Now, this year he let off a little bit towards the end of the year or the last half of the year. He batted anywhere from in the first 3 spots in the lineup, let's just say. He doesn't belong in any of the first 3 spots. I've said from the beginning that because of his style, he should be like maybe in the 6th hole. Okay, hey, there's a guy who maybe he can continue an inning for you because he can get a hit for you. But here's the thing. He's not going to take a lot of walks along with his hits, so he's really
not fit for the top of the order
guy.
He's not fit for the top of the order.
He's not a bat control guy, so he's not a 2 guy.
Right.
And he's not a power guy, so he's not a 3 guy or a 4 or 5 guy. So 6 is where he actually belongs.
Yeah.
Now, you just threw a ton of money at the guy who, now, again, I don't think I'm any more expert than I'm an armchair expert, but I've made out batting orders, and I know what ball players look like, and I know where I feel they should hit, whether it's league ball or whatever type of ball you want to talk about. I don't think this guy is in your top 5 in your order, not because he can't contribute, but because he just doesn't fit any of those spots well. And now you threw a ton of money at this guy. I'd say the same thing for Rizzo. You know what? Wally Post and Gus Bell and guys like that must be spinning in their graves when they see a guy like Anthony Rizzo, with a ton of money laid on him.
Getting $7 million a year next year?
Yeah, I mean that's ridiculous, and I don't think that the man has shown that he has that type of weight behind him to where at this point in time, I don't think that type of money should have been spent on him.
No, I don't think so either. Am I ready to give up on him and say he's a bust? No, not yet. Maybe another, Again, here's a guy who finally played his first full season in the majors.
He did, and I think he's. I know that Swaim said at the end, despite the fact that he was down around into the high 220s, 230, there were some things that Swaim felt that he did that were being overlooked.
He's good. He's good defensively.
That may be true. I know that he is, but the thing I would say is, we need a guy if they're going to bat him third or fourth in the order, who's going to be a consistent run producer. I see the Ron Santo effect with Rizzo too much, where, in a tight spot, he's taken called strike three too many times. Where you're the bread and butter guy. Even if the pitch is a little off the plate or it's questionable, you better be swinging because we need some production. We don't need you looking over a close pitch that the umpire may or may not call strike three on you. We need you to produce in this spot, and I don't see him doing it. So I just think the Cubs are not even close. What did you say? The 2015, maybe we might start to see some progress. I wouldn't even say then.
I would hope, certainly with the case of Baez, they get him up into AAA this year, which I guess is where he's going to be.
Jim, though, we're talking about one guy. I think the Cubs need a whole heck of a lot more than one guy.
They need a lot.
And you're talking about one young guy who maybe when he gets to the majors, he's not going to be any better than Castro or Rizzo. You don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with him. And the way they're going about things, they may totally screw him up by the time he gets up to the majors. We want you to take a few more pitches. We need about 20 more walks and 10 less home runs from you. I don't know.
Yeah. I honestly don't know. But now, getting back to the other issue, let's talk about some of the names that have been bandied about as
let's
manager.
Not.
Come on.
It's not even worth the time.
We've got 25 minutes to kill. It'll give you a chance to get some things off your chest here.
Man.
Manny Acta. That's Spanish for Jim Riggleman, by the way.
You know what? I never thought Manny Acta, and again, I'm the armchair expert, not an expert, but when he started to be mentioned for different jobs, when he first went from coaching to managing, I'm like, I just didn't have a good feel about him. Any of the guys, though, it's Acta is one guy, right? Hinch would be a ridiculous choice. That would be a ridiculous choice. He has no idea of what he's probably from what I've read about him, he's a good player development guy. Mm-hmm. But they said as a manager, he was just awful. He had no idea. Acta did not. The rap on Acta didn't really control his clubhouse. Wasn't really much. Renteria, Rich Renteria, and he was Rick Renteria. And by the way, I think he was drafted by the Cubs originally. Jim, I'm glad you said that because when they start talking to him about him as Rick Renteria, he was always Rich Renteria as a player.
Yeah.
And I don't know when he became Rick. Maybe it's the West Coast thing.
Maybe
He's in San Diego now.
Maybe it's that West Coast thing.
Actually, I think that to me, if now being serious about it and not just saying they all stink, I would think that in my way of thinking, that the two guys that I would like to see would either be Renteria or Martinez.
I was just about to say Martinez because here he is. This is a guy who's been next to the manager in Tampa Bay, Joe Maddon, for 6 years.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
five times making the playoffs, 4 times making the playoffs in those 6 years.
On top of it, I would say if I had to take the best managers in baseball, not the biggest names, but Joe Maddon, would have to be up there in my estimation. Say with Francona and Bochy as guys who now, and Francona just entered this group for me this year because when I look at the Cleveland Indians, I say, how the heck did he even get them in the playoffs? Because I don't think they're that good. Joe Maddon consistently has a team where I think, how do these guys score any runs? I understand their pitching is good, but pitching is not everything. You got to score a few runs. And then Bochy, I think, just does well wherever he's at as well. If any of what Maddon does, to get back to the subject, rubbed off on Davey Martinez, then I would say Davey Martinez would be the guy because I just don't know how Maddon even does it. I don't think he's got that kind of talent, but he consistently – and you know what? He starts out – I mean, this year they didn't start out well. But at the end, he had them right there. Did they win the division, or did they?
No, they were a wild card. They were a wild card.
But I mean, the fact that you had some Now, I'll tell you what, I don't know how the so-called experts looked at the division, but that's a very tough division because you got Boston, New York, Baltimore has a good young team. Toronto looked like they would be strong.
Basically, you had 4 teams in that division over 500 this year.
And
only Toronto was under 500.
And I have to say, again, this is just a snapshot in my own mind of the talent in that division. But of the teams that I mentioned, Tampa Bay has got to have the worst talent out of those 5 teams that we just mentioned: New York, Boston, Baltimore, Toronto, and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, I don't even think comes close to the talent. Yet they're in the they're in the wild card. They made the playoffs. I mean, Joe Madden does an excellent job, and if again, if that's rubbed off, Davey Martinez, which I'm sure he has learned about learned what Madden does, then I'd say that might be the guy for the job.
The other name, and I don't know enough about him, but and I got to think because somebody got his name crossed up one day. Brad Ausmus.
Where did he come from now? Is he coaching?
Yeah, he's coaching. And I don't know why. I don't know enough. I guess he's a minor league manager.
Okay.
The other name that's bandied about was the guy that was actually the first choice.
Sandy Alomar.
Well, no, Mike Maddox, and he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave Texas.
Well, my question is, why is Mike Maddox such a hot prospect? Is it because he's Greg Maddox's brother? I mean, the other thing is, he's a pitching coach. I don't know that necessarily ever translates into being a manager. Just like a hitting coach, does that translate into being a manager? Mike Maddox knows pitching, and I'm sure he knows baseball. I'm just saying, why is Mike Maddox such an intriguing prospect for the Cubs? I don't know what he's done that's that magnificent that would make him that type of a prospect.
All the meatball Cub fans said, well, his brother's going to come here and be the pitching coach.
Well, unless,
and his brother has already said, no.
No, I'm not,
I don't want to leave my family anymore during the summer.
Yeah, it's I just don't know where some of these. It reminds me of when the Bears got Dave Wannstedt, and I kept saying to myself, well, you know what? Dave Wannstedt coached the number 1 defense in the league. I think it was the number 1 defense in Dallas, and they won the Super Bowl. But my question in my mind is,
he had a strong run as a college defensive coordinator with Jimmy Johnson at Miami, too.
Well, here's that's the key thing right there. Jimmy Johnson. Okay, Jimmy Johnson was the coach. Jimmy Johnson when he is the coach, he's the architect of the team. You as the defensive coordinator take the guys that he likes and you put them together. And it was a very talented group of guys that he coached. So why the fact that you had success with guys who should be successful, and you are an assistant, why does that make you just automatically?
Does it automatically translate? Into success? No, it doesn't. And I honestly, I think if going back to what you said, if they make a choice, if they make a change, or they have to make a change. I think Davey Martinez would be a good choice.
I would like Davey Martinez.
And
I have nothing to go on this. I have nothing behind this other than a gut feeling. My second choice would be Renteria. I think he's been around the game a long time. I think he's had a variety of experiences in the game. He hasn't always been with winning clubs, but I don't think that means anything. I mean, you can learn a lot, whether you're with winning or losing clubs, or I'm sure he's been with both and everything in between as well in his long career in the major leagues. So I'd rather see a guy like that. Now, when I go back to a guy like A.J. Hinch, he may be a very smart guy, but he had a really short career as a player.
Short career as a manager.
Short career as a manager. So what are you really getting there?
Nothing.
I don't think you're going to get much of anything there. So
nothing. In Manny Acta and some of these others that were mentioned about are Dale Swain light.
Well, I'm going to always reserve judgment on Dale Swaim. I think he did an outstanding job, really, with what he was handed.
Yeah.
I think it was a tough job, and I my objection is the way with these guys is the way he was handled.
Yeah, I guess I go back to say what I said before. Was it a bad hire? I don't know. Was it a good fire? I don't know. Did it have to be done? Yeah, probably something had to be changed. Was it the time to do it now?
What has to be changed is what has to be changed is the ownership at the Cubs, because Ricketts is just overseen again the three worst consecutive years in the history of the team.
And that says a lot, considering.
I was going to say, considering the team.
They haven't won in 105 years.
There's something that's been on my mind the last week, too, and we haven't talked about this at all. But I see that the Sox, and I don't know, as of today, I don't know if they signed him yet, but it looks like they're going to sign this guy Abreu.
Yeah.
And I have, actually, I have two sets of thoughts on this, and they're contrary to each other. I think the Sox have to do something, and
they need to do something to make a splash.
They need to do something to make a splash. But at the same time, you're talking about. I think when the season starts next year, Abreu will be 27 years old. Played in Cuba. God knows what the talent is like down there. I'm sure there's good ball players in Cuba.
Okay, he's 27, which probably means he's 33.
That's possible. It's possible too. He could be. That happens a lot with players from the Dominican, Cuba, whatever.
He's probably 33.
And the other thing is, and not that this always means a whole lot, but there's a difference of opinion by some of the scouts on exactly what they saw with this guy when he did whatever type of tryout he did for the teams that were interested. The other thing is, I'm not sure, and I should have looked at this before I came. Of the teams that seemed to have interest in him, was the Red Sox one of the teams that were interested in him or no? I thought the Angels might be, in the Rangers.
The Angels, I remember the Angels, I remember the Rangers, and I remember the White Sox.
Okay, because
I don't know if there. I think there was another team, but I don't remember what it was.
But I think I find it interesting that the talent available for the major leagues has gotten so thin, in my opinion. And the game, I think, is I don't know if attendance reflects it, Jim, because I think they're doing pretty well attendance-wise. But in the time that I've been a baseball fan, I think we're at the nadir of interest. Let's put it. All major league players are talented. Don't get me wrong, but I'll say this: of interesting players that you want to see. I can never remember a time in my time as a Major League Baseball fan when there have been so few players that I was really interested in watching.
No, I know. I'm the same way.
And Abreu, I think, is symbolic of what's happening in the majors, because they are so desperate for talent that they're willing to. Now, I'm not saying don't sign the guy, but do you see the money that they're talking about throwing at this guy?
$68 million.
How the heck can you justify $68 million over, I don't care how many years,
6 years. Yeah.
for a guy who's been playing in Cuba? You haven't even seen him actually. I don't, other than maybe a handful of games which are maybe available on tape, maybe in the I don't know if they have the World Baseball Congress or whatever the heck they call it, some of these international competitions which are no really good measuring stick, because you're playing, soup to nuts competition. You're going to throw that kind of money at this guy? I think that's totally unjustified.
It's something that they need to do, at least from a perspective of the White Sox, to energize their, to give their fan base something to look at. Mm-hmm. Now, that obviously means, even though he hasn't announced it, we've seen the last of Paulie Konerko.
Well, it could be, though, that it could be that he'll be back in some capacity as a, did they jettison the batting coach?
Yes.
Didn't they jettison their hitting coach?
Yes.
So
Manto got fired.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Caderco come back as a coach / part-time player,
coach, maybe
some type of thing like that. Because I don't think they're going to totally. Because there'll be a lot of people who are aggravated and ticked off, and the Sox fans. I have to say this to their credit. I think they follow these things a lot closer than fans of other sports organizations in this town. And you will have a percentage who will at least for a period of time not come to the games if they screw around with Canerco.
The Sox fans are always the ones that say, "Show me something, earn my support," and that's one of the reasons. I guess I always look at the White Sox and say, well, I tolerate the White Sox, but I admire their fans for saying they're not going to go out there unless you give me a reason to go out there.
No,
Cub fans just go out there because they can drink beer.
Yeah, that's
gentlemen. I'll tell you a little bit about the Cubs. My former boss, Joe Gentile, God rest his soul. Every year in April, he would take the graduating class from St. Ignatius High School and take them out and treat them to a day at Wrigley Field. And he would throw out the first ball. And many, many times he told me, John, he says, I'm 80-some years old. He says, I'll never see the Cubs in a World Series. And Joe is dead 2 years already, and they still haven't won a World Series yet.
They're not even close.
I thought about that. I thought about that last week because on the 14th last week would have been my mother's 95th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
The 14th was the 105th anniversary of the last Cub World Series victory.
Yeah.
And the 14th was also the 10th anniversary of the Bartman game. Of the Bartman game, too.
Wow, 10th anniversary already.
And Joe Gentile died on October the 10th, the year 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he always told me, he says, John, I'll never see the Cubs in a World Series. And by God, he was right.
Well, John, you're making, again, Joe, like Jim and I, he was probably more of an armchair expert, but there was a guy who was a very intelligent man, ran a radio station, was a very successful car dealer. So I guess what I would say about that is a sharp man, and when you hear that out of a man like that's mouth, you know what? It's not just like a lot of us will do just off the top of our heads, the Cubs stink and they'll never win. There's some thinking behind it, and I think what he saw probably, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I guess I'm going to just go ahead and do it, is he saw that a screwed-up organization, one that never could get it right in the time that he was around on this earth, and one that's still not getting it right. So I could see what Joe is saying, John.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced we'll see it either.
I don't know. I don't think we're going to see it, to be honest.
You know what aggravates me more than anything, when I sit in my chair upstairs and watch the 10 o'clock news and hear all what they want to do to Wrigley Field, how they want to change everything and screw up the rooftop people across the road and all that.
Well, I have no problems with that.
Okay,
they've poached for years.
I think that they should take that money and put it into the club and try to better the organization so we could get a World Series in this town. I mean, look at what our baseball season was this year. Both our teams, Sox and Cubs, were way down in the basement.
Lost over 200 games between them.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
I don't think either of them had 100 losses.
No,
but it was close to 200 losses.
No, it was, I think, 197 losses between them. I think it was something like that.
It was a pathetic year. And John, I don't know if you had heard this or if any of us had heard this, but I want to say that might be the worst year in the history of Chicago baseball where the two teams were that bad at the same time.
No, that was announced.
Yeah,
it was. That's in the books.
I thought there was a time, I think, in the late 40s. I know there was one year the Sox lost 101 games, and I thought the Cubs were around there. I thought that might have challenged it too, but it was a terrible season. But now we get to the point where at least we have a World Series to talk about. And I don't really care about either team.
Actually, you know what? I love the fact that you have two great organizations, and you know what? I would have been happy with any combination of Cardinals, Dodgers, Red Sox, Tigers, because those are all old franchises with a lot of history behind them and a lot of success over the years. And I would, as a baseball fan, would have been happy to see any combination of the
Well, I guess
of
from
those four.
Yeah, I guess from a quality of play. I mean, I go back and you know, even though I'm not a Cardinals fan, I look at the organization, what they're managed to produce, especially like you said when you looked at the guys from short over to first at one point in time. I think you used the phrase, you looked at them and you went, who
are
and
these guys?
Who and who?
Yeah, right.
Are on that side of the infield.
Right.
And they always find a way to do it. I admire the fact that the Red Sox bounced back from a terrible season last year, probably because they were mismanaged by Bobby Valentine.
Well, I tell you what, I don't often agree with the media because I don't consider us a part of the media, even though I guess we are, in a sense, in a small, very small sense.
Scary.
But, yeah, that is scary. But the one thing that when I went to bed, it was I think it was a Saturday night. The Tigers were up 5-1, and the Red Sox were in danger of losing. I think their first two games, both at home. So things looked pretty bleak for the Red Sox when I had gone to bed. And the next morning I woke up and found that the Red Sox had come back and won. And a commentator had made the statement that David Ortiz, his home run, was the pivotal point in that series. And not often do I agree with statements like that, but I would say from what I had seen and observed in that game and what was happening with the Red Sox, I thought, well, they look like almost like stick a fork in them at this point. They're done. And Ortiz, I think that was a huge blow for the Red Sox and brought them back from the dead.
And it was the same thing Saturday night. And I think one of the things that I said when we were watching the game Saturday night, when Leyland made the pitching change, because he was so locked in on pitch counts with Scherzer.
Mm-hmm.
Their bullpen collapsed. The Red Sox won the game, and I'm sitting here thinking, here's probably your world champions next by the time we get done with this, because they've got that momentum and they've got it at the right time.
You know,
in other words, I'm taking the Red Sox.
You're taking the Red Sox. I'm not put it this way, I'm not a big proponent of so-called momentum. I think sometimes it happens. But I think the reality is that when what is the first game tonight?
Saturday night.
We gotta wait all
No.
It's got to come sometime.
No, it's tomorrow night. Excuse me.
Tomorrow night.
I was thinking the division series, the championship series.
I think you could throw any notion of momentum for either team out the window because it's just going to be a start over, brand new thing. And then maybe momentum will be built within that series. That's possible, but I don't think there will be any carryover momentum from the previous series for either team.
Yeah. Favorite Boston, the odds makers have Boston favored to win this series.
Who is in the World Series this year?
Boston and St. Louis.
Oh, they are. St. Louis did make it then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I always give a little bit of a nod to the Cardinals because I think they are the outstanding organization of this, let's say this decade. And they've been an outstanding organization from probably the 1930s or even the 20s onward for the most part. I think they had a little downtime maybe in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And then they bounced back in the 60s, and they've been strong all the way through. And
pretty consistently.
Pretty
Occasional
consistently.
little dip, but they come back.
And I think that goes to, I think I don't know, we might have mentioned this before, but Tony La Russa had said that at one time when George Kissel, who was a longtime organization guy for the Cardinals, when he was alive, the ball players in the organization had to pass the Kissel test.
Mm-hmm.
And, he didn't.
Sounds like a personal.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But, what he was saying is, when you look at the Cardinals, you look at a team that knows how to play baseball, And I'm not saying the Red Sox don't, but the Red Sox are a fine organization as well. But I think the Cardinals are the outstanding organization in baseball at this point from a baseball point of view.
From a baseball
still pure
standpoint,
baseball
right.
point of view, they are
Right.
probably the. So I have nothing against the Red Sox, but I think I'm going to go National League, and I'm
All
not
right.
a big anti-Cardinals guy like a lot of Cubs fans are. Of course, I love to see the Cubs beat them when we play them.
That's right. I think
But,
it's just. I just don't like Cardinal fans.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you. Did you see, Jim? I'm glad you said that. In the last game between the Dodgers and the Cardinals, the Dodgers sent Skip Shoemaker up to the plate to pinch hit, and the Cardinal fans gave him a standing ovation. Now, here's a guy who I don't know if he ever batted more than 250. Certainly wasn't a big home run or RBI guy, but the Cardinal fans and Shoemaker's with the Dodgers now.
Right.
Showed their appreciation for all of the versatility and team effort that he made while he was in St. Louis. So, you know what? The Cardinals fans show me a lot. Maybe we should hire a Cardinals fan as the next GM of the Cubs.
That's good, and they do that, and I find that interesting, and I like that because Cub fans are ridiculed when they do that to one of their old ones. When Mark DeRosa's gotten a standing ovation, or David DeJesus. We're coming up on the end of this. We're running up against the wall. John's putting the music on. That's his subtle way of saying, get out of here.
Get out of town.
Get out of town. Well, thanks. It's been an interesting hour. We could probably go about another 3 or 4 hours if they'd let us. So let's just wrap it up and say thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Take care.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John Nevada Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John Nevada, edited by Stephen Lehman, and our audio engineer is James Rohde. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, October the 22nd. Be safe, and thanks for listening.